On March 18th, 3 weeks later, Fitch maintained DWP's current AA rating. Didn't downgrade, but maintained the existing credit rating. In the process of doing that, Fitch acknowledged that the City Council still might weigh in. And acknowledging that risk and considering the fact that we might not adjust the ECAF today or next week or next month or 6 months from now, Fitch continued to maintain the AA rating. Now, PA has made its recommendations for a 0.8, and we've all kind of assumed that that was the target that we need to shoot for. But PA's recommendations and its prediction of a potential downgrade are based on a number of assumptions, including DWP's current aggressive capital investment program, without consideration of what adjustments there might be in that capital investment program that might change that risk level. Assumptions about a projected energy portfolio that includes a balance of fossil fuels and renewable fuel sources, but we don't even have an IRP from DWP yet to know what that portfolio is going to be or whether it can work. PA made no assumptions about potential cost cutting that DWP could engage in. And I know that Chairwoman Perry has asked for a long time now for a report about potential cost cutting, and it hasn't been forthcoming. And then finally, based on those assumptions, we have a firm recommendation of a 0.8 adjustment in ECAF. But then today, PA Consulting says, well, maybe it can be 0.5. Well, maybe it can be 0.2. Maybe it needs to be 0.1375. The truth is that all of these assumptions, all of these predictions are based on an array of policy decisions that we will need to make and how that impacts on DWP's risk level. Finally, I have to say this. Here we are, March 30th, facing a supposed April 1st deadline. We are supposed to act urgently on an emergency basis, making complex energy policy, complex decisions that will impact every one of our constituents, complex decisions that will no doubt cost jobs and I'll come back to this, may in fact create jobs. We don't know which will be more yet. But we have to make that decision on an emergency basis. And yet the DWP board has not agendized as of today a meeting to deal with this emergency. Now, I think that's just outrageous arrogance to put on this council, the need to do that with the threat, the emergency threat of an imminent downgrade. And the board has not even chosen to set a meeting to discuss it. In that context, it's going to be very, very difficult for me to be able to support this kind of a proposal. A credit agency evaluating the creditworthiness of the DWP without any increase in the ECAF, without any other changes, is saying that DWP can complete its existing transfer without an increase, and it would be able to do that without a downgrade of its creditworthiness. So I think, you know, that's another gun that we need to have taken away from our heads while we're trying to consider this complex energy policy. I'm a little disappointed that some of the conversation has been suggestive that you either support this ECAF increase or you're against renewable energy. You either support this ECAF increase or you're against green jobs. That's just a false choice and I think a false assumption that we're making in this argument. I agree wholeheartedly with all my friends here in the environmental community with whom I've worked so closely for so long that we absolutely have to get this city off of coal. I don't think there should be any question about that. It matters because of our contribution to climate change. It matters because for years, for decades, we've been exporting our air pollution out of state to other locales. It matters because, as Mr. Alarcon said, under AB 32 and the coming CARB regulations, we will face potential penalties if we don't reduce our carbon footprint. And moving more to renewable energy will actually decrease the volatility of our fuel supplies and create more predictability for our ratepayers. And perhaps as important as any, by moving to a greater renewable energy portfolio, we're going to create lots and lots of important jobs that will be the foundation of our economy for the next century. And I've been working on these very policies for a long time. I chaired our Renewable Energy Select Committee in the State Assembly. I authored the legislation that passed through the legislature that would take us to a 33% renewable energy portfolio statewide. But that's not what's before us today. There are many, many ways that we can alter the carbon footprint that this city faces right now. And none of those have been really part of the analysis, and until we get an integrated resources plan, we won't know what's the most cost-efficient way to do it. We won't know what creates the most jobs. We won't know what the real cost of reducing that carbon footprint is and how it compares to these fines. We can move to natural gas now. We can move to a greater dependency on large hydro, which doesn't even count as a renewable. We can look at more utility-owned generation of renewables and more non-utility-owned generation of utilities. Which one of those is best? We have no idea. Until there's an integrated resources plan before us so that we can see what intermittent resources require, what fossil fuels to back them up, until we can see what the system reliability issues are, we'll have no idea what the best way to invest this money is. And so I think that we can't get sucked into that discussion. We can't get sucked into the fact that, you know, we will look as though we're against renewable energy if we don't support this increase. As far as I can see, DWP right now has $1 billion reserve, $300 million in reserve, and another $547 million in cash that it could make it available as reserve right now. So to suggest that our long-term renewable energy years away from us is going to be adversely impacted because we don't make this change for the next fiscal quarter, I think is just simply not intellectually honest to suggest. I think we can take the time that we need to evaluate truly what will be the costs of that renewable program, but only once we know what the renewable program that's being proposed actually is.